Okay, guys. So I'm back with my set of next panelists who will be discussing more about corporate startup engagements, global best practices. So we have with us Mr. Peter Kisadha, who is the researcher at Future Africa. We have with us Jonathan, who is Senior Market Engagement Manager, Ecosystem Accelerator at GSMA. And the session will be moderated by Mr. Ajay. So over to you guys to take it ahead. And yeah, I'll just hide myself.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jagruti, for introducing the panel. So, interesting topic. We have been talking a lot about corporate innovation, the roles that corporates have to play for the past day and a little bit more. And it's wonderful to have you both, Jonathan and Peter, wearing different hats. One more of an ecosystem enabler, and the other one, Future Africa, who is heavily invested into early stage startup ecosystem across the continent. So, welcome to both of you. Before we dive in with a few questions, if you can briefly introduce yourselves, the work that you do at your organization, that would be awesome. So, Jonathan, if you can go with you first.
Thank you very much, Ajay, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. So I'm Jonathan Bordage, currently based in London. So I'm working at the GSMA, which is the International Trade Association that represents the interest of the mobile network operators in the world. And I'm part of a team called Ecosystem Accelerator, which basically enhance and bridges the gap between mobile network operators and startups across the world. So we do it through different ways: acceleration programs, grants, and basically our hope is to increase the partnership between startups and MNOs across the world. So very happy to be on the panel today, and I think it's a very timely topic to discuss.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jonathan. Peter.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Like Jonathan said, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. So my name is Peter Kisadha, and I'm the head of research at Future Africa. Future Africa is an early-stage investment firm, and as we like to say, we invest in innovators that are turning Africa's most difficult challenges into global business opportunities. So what I do basically is to help bring structure around our thoughts and thesis in how we invest, because we understand and realize that things keep on evolving over time. So we need to make sure that we're still grounded in how we approach, the innovators we're investing. As an investor, some of our portfolio companies include Andela, Flutterwave, and Move, which has a very huge partnership with Uber. So that's why I'm very excited to talk about corporate partnerships, because it's one of the vehicles that we've used to get some of our portfolio companies to the next level. Thank you.
Great. Those were like some fairly small names from the continent, the more popular small names, I would say. But no, thank you for that, Peter. So I'll dive into this. I mean, we're going to talk about corporate startup engagements and the global best practices, and great to have Jonathan representing GSMA on this one with the kind of work that you do with MNOs, but also the different models that with which GSMA engages with different markets. So if you were to kind of take a step back, sorry, and talk about how should corporates wanting to chart the path of building out corporate startup engagements even begin with defining their objectives?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think it's looking at the future now. There's no option for MNOs but to think about innovation, right? There's lots of disruption happening in the fintech world, for instance. We've heard a lot about Wave, which can represent the free to operators. So we need to think about the future. So I think before doing that, you need to look at your current status, right? So what are my current challenges? Am I scared to fail? What are the current threats? How can I diversify my revenue? How can I improve my brand reputation? So you need to look at all those different elements. And based on the current diagnostic that you would put on the table, define how you would put in place, right? And I'm pretty sure that Peter can tell us a bit more about the different models, right, on the way corporates, in my case, MNOs can engage with startup. But I think to define those objectives, I think a strong diagnostic is required. And yeah, thinking about the ecosystem you live in.
No,
Yeah.
great. Thanks, Jonathan, for mentioning that. I mean, yesterday we had Nicholas from Orange Innovation join us, and while we approached him to kind of talk about the work that they do across the continent, he was kind enough to bring in a couple of his startups, one from Senegal and one from Kenya, to kind of make it more interactive, but also kind of get the startups to talk about the value. I mean, it kind of leads into one of the questions I have lined up, but it kind of touches upon how or why, even for startups, I guess it is important to look at the value that some of these MNOs bring. The rails are already there, the infrastructure is there. How can they leverage that? How can they leverage the distribution, the trust that they already have? So thank you for touching on that. So Peter, I'll come to you. Sorry, with my next question, which is more to do with the different types of corporate startup engagement models. And because you have been researching, and that's how I reached out to you. I read up an article that you had put out talking about different ways in which African corporates have been engaging with the ecosystem. Which are the ones that you view as a successful one?
Yeah, I mean, so there are various buckets here, and I would say one of them that we've seen is sort of identifying an agent, a go-to middleman who you think is actually competent now. For example, an accelerator or a management consultancy firm, and we've seen this with Standard Bank in South Africa, working with Founders Factory, Africa, which is an acceleration, as well as a venture builder out of the UK to set up, their branch in South Africa, which actually my previous company was part of the first, initial participants in the cohort. And then the other one that we've seen also is direct engagements, and companies like MTN, for example. And I think Jonathan is very familiar with this. They invested in Jumia, and then also have gone out of their way to start working with startups. So what they do essentially here is, they engage with you from the corporate level, right, at the group level. So they don't have an intermediary. And then the third one that we've seen work is setting up a separate unit that is actually not investing or engaging off the balance sheet of the group or the main entity, but rather it's given resources. They hire new people that they think are capable of doing this. They give them a budget on an annual or maybe 2 years or 5 years, and then they just give them targets and they report to the main entity. If you asked me what I think, based in the context of startups that I think should be the most opted for, is one whereby you're separating the corporate entity from its business from that of engaging the startups, because not only is it faster, but it's easier for you to define what you could say measures of success, because a corporate entity is different from a startup in how because bureaucracy is not inherently bad, but it's not the best way to engage a startup, because there's a partnership I worked on in the past few years, and it took us over 12 months to launch a company. And this is a startup. You cannot do that with a startup. So, and I think one of the companies that has done this is Goldman Sachs, which recently spun off one of their units to invest in African startups. I think I would really, really get behind that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan and Peter, for your opening kind of comments on my first questions. Now, when it comes, and this, I'll go back to Jonathan with this one, because it kind of plugs in well into a variety of work that the GSMA Foundation does. Because when it comes to resources, we always almost think of money first. But in this case, like I also touched upon the orange example, when it comes to MNOs, when it comes to your partners setting up startup engagement programs, what, according to you, would you classify as allocating the right resources for a particular program?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Before even thinking about resources, I would say mindset. Company culture. I think it's a very important one, right? Because you need to. I mean, you need to make this flow into your organization, right? And I think this is a very strong resource, right? Once the organization has that culture of innovation, I think that's a great way to approach and tackle innovation. So all about the mindset and the company culture. And then obviously, it's a matter of structuring this, right? So which department is going to be in charge of innovation? My usual take and suggestion based on experience in the industry is corporate should work as startups, right? And if you want to start with innovation, do an MVP. Do your own MVP by developing, maybe creating a very small unit within a department. In most cases, commercial departments, and make them develop a small idea, right? Show the success of it, and go step by step, right? So to answer your question, I would say mindset. Having that innovation company culture, and secondly, thinking step by step and create a success stories that can then scale across the organization.
Great. Peter, if you want to add to that one.
And I think I'm pretty comfortable with what Jonathan has put across. Also try to be conscious of the time.
So in that case, I'll come to you with the next one. It kind of goes to the the mindset aspect which Jonathan spoke about, and either of you can pick on it. I mean, who within an organization do you think should own and set the vision and strategy for such programs?
Yeah. I think, Jonathan, you could take a step up at this, but I also give my initial thoughts. So typically, innovation is not straightforward. So you go and find, for example, some of the executives that have engaged at companies, and they find it hard that the rest of the organization is not picking up on what they are proposing, right? And it typically is because it's not being. People are always looking forward for guidance from the top, echelon of the organization, not the board. Because we've also talked to, because a typical board across Africa right now, people in their 60s, in their 70s, they are looking for their dividends. Some of them are owners. So the people here that we're looking at are the executives, right? The top executives. And beyond just sitting in their offices, I think they need to fall down, make sure that whatever message they are talking about is actually trickling down to the right people who are supposed to be doing this, but then also actively protect the innovation that's happening. Because if you're trying to bring a new solution to the market, let's say if the year is 2007 and you bring M-Pesa to the market, and voice is the leading generator of revenue, there is no way you're going to justify investing in something that might not, because we have no idea where Safaricom invested before they got to hit with M-Pesa, right? So you need to actively protect this. And yeah, that's what I could say. I would go with the top executives, preferably the CEO or the managing director at the firm.
Yeah, and maybe just to jump on it, so the top to bottom development of innovation is extremely important, but I think bottom to top as well, right? And you talk about the age of boards. I think we need to think about reverse mentoring as well, and I think that's a new trend that should put in place to create. Again, I will come back to the mindset, but that sort of reverse mentoring should bring us back to that mindset on innovating.
Great, thanks both of you on that one. So, in your experience, Jonathan, of enabling and partnering with MNOs across different regions, what are the areas in which you find telcos, in your case, or other stakeholders within the broader ICT ecosystem? What are the areas in which they are willing to work with these third-party providers or startups or emerging technology companies? And there could be a variety of reasons why they would choose to and choose not to. So, in your experience, what are those low risk areas or quick win kind of areas where MNOs have shown an open tendency to partner with startups?
It's I mean, as someone working for a trade association, it's a good question. I would say that MNOs are open to work with any third party provider as long as it provides value. So obviously you would build relations with bigger corporates when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to finance, or when it comes to your supply chain process, right? So I think in general, I mean, the industry is open to work with any sort of provider. The only moment where there's a reluctancy to partner is when there's a threat, when there's a competition engaged, or when there's a threat to your business model, right? So this is a bit difficult to explain, right? It would be a case by case sort of example, but I think my answer would be that it's quite an open industry when it comes to innovation, but it depends. It depends on all the situations in the market and all different conditions of the ecosystem.
Great, Peter, if you want to add to that one.
No, I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Cool. So with that, I'll come to the last question, and I'll go to both of you. If you were to pick top 3 keywords for continued corporate innovation strategy that helps a large behemoth, a dinosaur, leverage startup engagements, what would the keywords be for you? Let's go with you, Peter.
I think one of the things I'll say is respect. Because there is a tendency for some corporates to approach the engagement as sort of godfather and godson, and what that does, it drains resources for the startups because they are chasing something that is not allowing to be called. So I think if you can approach it with respect and say we are here, we are sitting on the table, the party that's on the table has something to offer, that would be really, really beneficial. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good one. And I would say, I mean, close to what you said, Peter, openness and trust, which is very close, collaboration, and straightforward thinking. So think about the future, right? And think about startups as your partner for the future.
Yeah. I think also maybe what I would say, it's not a keyword that is in light of embracing, but more sort of dropping, which is fear. And the fear in the sense is more of because corporates are scared that people are going to sort of out innovate them, or cannibalize their market. They've engaged in only partnerships that are more incremental rather than groundbreaking, to expand the market size, to educate more consumers or users of their products. I think they can be able to ditch that fear and sort of embrace a growth mindset and look at it of how do we widen the pie that we're trying to compete with. And yeah, I think that could be very beneficial for both the parties and the entire ecosystem in the end.
Trust, growth mindset, respect. Respect, I heard for the first time, but I guess it's very spot on, because a lot of times, I guess, when corporates and startups sit across the table, I think, like you pointed out, right? It's more like the godfather and the godson, like you put out. But I guess, yeah, having that mutual respect is super critical, and trust, like Jonathan put out. So thank you, guys. Thanks both of you for sharing your insights and some very succinct kind of points. If we can just see if there are folks with any questions, we can maybe take one or two questions, and we can end this session. So, Jagrati, if you can help us with questions, if any.
Sure, sure. I think there are more reactions coming in. People are loving the chat that you guys had. Any questions, anyone? You can just put it on the Q&A section, or maybe just raise your hands. Well, I don't think there's any question. No. Okay, just a quick one. There's one. Is there a hierarchy of engagement startups should follow?
You want to start, Peter?
I actually was trying to say that you should go about that because this is what you do for for a living, so you're better positioned to guide.
That's very fine. You my guest, so I always like to invite guests to answer first. No, I would say that there's no hierarchy. To be honest, it would always depend on the model, right? So Peter, you mentioned different ways of collaborating, right? Starting from a simple development of a product to an acquisition. Obviously, we can talk about Stripe and Paystack as the main example of recent acquisition, but I think it should be it should be depending on the case. But my advice to startup is obviously to identifying the right partner within the organizations, right? First of all, right, and based on this engagement, develop a strong value proposition, understanding what are the needs of the partner, and to collaborate with you, and what are your hats. So what are you bringing on the table? Once you have that clear understanding, I think that would help you structure your proposition and bring something to the table.
Yeah. Okay. And then I think I'll answer the one from Ravindra, which says any company that excelled in building a robust startup program in Africa. Of course, this is a very broad question in terms of measuring excelling. But what I would say is Google, ironically, which is not an African company, has done a very tremendous job here. They have a very, very good program where they add mid startups, and they just doubled down this year by launching, their $1 billion investment with a $50 million, fund dedicated to investment. But they've been doing the accelerator, I think, for the past 4 years. But even before that, they had Google developer programs, just because, talent is very, very, beneficial for startups, right? So they've opened up their resources. And actually, one of the ways they've done is they've come here, set up an office, hired talent to make sure that they're actually on the ground. Yeah.
I think there's one last question I'll take. We have many, but still. What are 3 industries that are most impactful while being most ripe for corporate innovation?
I think I'll go first here. One of them is there's so much money that has come into payments, for example, but at the same time there's so much work that needs to be done, and you don't get to realize this until one day you need to pay people across borders. You need to have money sent across borders, or you travel to a new country and you need to get around, to pay for things that are as simple as food, buy gadgets and all that from e-commerce platforms. So, like I would say, financial services, because it's the backbone for most things to move. If you want healthcare, you need to pay for education, you need to pay almost everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and to add on top of it, I'm looking at the challenges in the continent, right? And so I think every infrastructure related industry, right? So we can think construction, we can think telecommunication, we can think financial payments or mobile financial services, as you said. So think infrastructure. So think more vertical, not necessarily a specific industry. So think cut across, sorry, not necessarily industry. And I wouldn't say that. I mean, we could. There's ripe, right? So there's opportunities in everything, you know. So the more challenges you spot, the more there's opportunities for corporate innovation. So or for startups. So yeah, I think first about the challenges, and based on those, that's the opportunity to develop your innovations.
Well, that's all. So yeah, so thank you so much, Jonathan and Peter, for joining us for this wonderful chat. I think a lot of things to learn from you guys, and yeah, so look forward for you guys to just hang around, meet few startups and different other stakeholders in the room. So yeah, so now we break out for networking session, and maybe just you can grab a coffee or a snack to sit for next 2 3 hours for the second half of the day. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
thank you. Bye bye.